Well, hey, Southern Oregon, welcome back to the Real Estate Show. We've got Diane Davis and Brandy Jennings, a First American Title, coming into the studio this Memorial weekend. And we're going to be talking about liens, lien searches, judgments, credit, construction, all things that have to do with liens and lien searches in a real estate transaction. Brandy Jennings and Diane Davis, First American Title, great educators, very smart. They've both been in the business a long time, and they'll be joining us in the studio shortly. In the meantime, we've got some interesting stats to report again this week. We have an increase in listings again in all three counties. I think this makes 6 weeks in a row. But before I get ahead of myself, let's go through all three counties, county by county, so you know what's going on. Let's start with Jackson County first. The year-over-year prices in Jackson County this week were down 9%. The average single-family home costing $517,698 in Jackson County. The number of solds in Jackson County year-over-year were down 21% this week. We had 40 closings in the residential market in SOMLS in Jackson County this week. The number of listings, however, in Jackson County year over year were up 10% this week. We had 761 active listings on SOMLS in Jackson County this week. And that does make 5 or 6 weeks in a row for Jackson County. Let's go to Josephine County next. The prices year over year in Josephine County are up 7% this week. The average single family home costing $484,464. The number of sold year over year in Josephine County were down 26% this week. We had 14 closings in Josephine County in the residential market on SOMLS this week. The number of listings, however, in Josephine County were up 14% year over year this week, and that does make a 6 week in a row. We had 366 active listings in the residential market in Josephine County this week on SOMLS. Klamath County is doing really well in all three departments. This week, Klamath County prices year over year are up 12%. With the average single family home in Klamath County, can you believe it? $396,800 residential Klamath County this week, year over year. Wow. We also have the number of solds year over year in Klamath County have gone up 15%. The 15 closings on SOMLS in Klamath County this week. And the number of listings in Klamath County also up 18% year over year. We had 276 active listings on SOMLS in Klamath County this year. So congratulations to Klamath County this week. You're the big winner. You're up in prices, 12%. You're up in number of sold year over year, 15%. And you're up in listings, 18% year over year. But I just want to point out, we have an uptick in listings in all three counties for 6 weeks in a row. We still don't have enough to fulfill what every buyer wants, but we're doing better. In the meantime, let's get First American Brandy and Diane. Well, thanks, Brandy and Diane. We're so glad you could come on today.
Thanks for having us.
So, title companies have a really, really big job in the world. And the work that you do is so super important. And a lot of it has to do with title searches and lien searches. And I think a lot of people hear those words and they don't really know what that means and what it entails. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, Diane is our title manager, so I think she's probably the best person to answer this question.
Yeah, there's our title searches include everything of public record. And so not only the easements and the CCRs and all who owns it will show up. The majority of things that you have to deal with are liens that show up. There's two types of liens. There's voluntary liens and involuntary liens. The The voluntary liens are anything you put a record, like you loan money against the property. And that would be considered a voluntary lien. Involuntary liens would be anything that maybe happened that you weren't planning on, like an IRS lien or a judgment of some sort. A construction lien, if you know, you're going to sell and you just remodeled your house. That sort of thing. Child support usually isn't spousal support, those type of items. And we'll reflect all those because they are either recorded or in the court records. So they're a public record. That's how we find those.
And every once in a while, maybe a credit lien where someone didn't pay, you know, their bills and they had tried. So maybe like the bank would record a judgment against them to make sure.
Yeah, you see them with Discover Card is, you know, the judgment creditor and stuff like that. They all, once they get docketed in the courts, we have to show those because they attach to the real property that anybody owns.
So what if you're a buyer and you don't own real property yet? You don't own a house, like this is your first house, or you're in between owning things. How do they know it's you?
Well, it doesn't attach till you own the property. So when you go to buy the property, you're good. The liens won't attach till the minute you take title. The only thing, and we don't have to worry about that because even if the buyer was getting a loan to purchase the property, that loan would have priority, and then anything that they had, judgment, Discover Card, child support, would come on behind that.
Yes, and we don't know how some of the other title companies work, but at First American, we use what we call purchase money theory. So when a buyer is purchasing a home, any judgments that are attached to them aren't going to attach to the property, and we don't have to take care of them through our closing because again, they don't attach till they are the actual owner. But we have heard that other companies will make them clear those judgments and things and still attach those, even though it really wouldn't matter because the new lender would be in first position, and that's why we do things the way that we do. However, if their lender sees a judgment or something like that on their credit report, they may require that to be paid and taken care of before closing, even though it's not on the preliminary title report and search that we do.
You know, you hear lenders talk about paying off things before closing. So that's not really what we're talking a lot about today, but it does come up. It's pretty common.
Yeah.
So there's different kinds of searches at different points by different people, I guess. So you guys are doing searches to find out what's going on, and it's about the people as well as the property. Are you doing searches on the people too?
Yeah.
So what kind of things are you looking for with the people?
Well, so when someone attaches a judgment or lien, they're attaching it to the person. But if that person owns property, then it attaches to the property as well. But it does follow the person, if that makes sense. And then with lenders, you know, they're maybe asking them to take care of some of their bills before we close on the transaction. And that's probably to get their debt to income ratio at a certain level to get.
Oh, so they qualify better.
Exactly.
Yes.
But if there's a judgment or child support that's showing on their credit report, they're going to require for that to be paid through escrow or taken care of beforehand or satisfied to be made current, even though it's not attached to the property yet.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then throughout the life of our transaction, once it gets opened and we run our initial title search, you run it not only on the property, but you include the parties. So that way, every time like you need to date it down or to run a better date, everything's automatically searched. So, and then we have a practice of not closing within 30 days, I think, but most of our escrow teams like to go 2 weeks. They don't like their title report to be too old.
Yeah.
So, and then right at recording, part of the recording process is they date down that file again and run everything to make sure right up until the time of recording, everything's clear.
Yeah. There are a lot of different types of lien searches that we do. So not only are we doing lien searches on the person and whatever's attached to the property, but we also do, after we receive the preliminary title report from title, there will be lien searches done for places like Pacific Power, or not Pacific Power, but
The municipality.
the municipalities. So like Rogue Valley Sewer Services or City of Eagle Point. So we'll do a lien search with them to make sure that they get paid and the bill is current when we transfer ownership to the new buyer. So that's a lien search we do, and we normally order those about 3 weeks before closing. The reason why we don't do it right away is if that closing is going to be pushed out a couple months, those companies will charge you every single time. When we order payoffs, whether it's for your trust deed or your line of credit, every time a payoff is ordered, they charge you a statement or
That's
payoff.
shocking.
Yeah,
No.
so we try to keep that cost down for everybody involved so that we don't have multiple statement and payoff fees added to those. So about 3 weeks out, we order those lien searches and those payoffs. But you know, sometimes closing has to get extended and we have to order another payoff, and we'll do that. And then as Diane was saying, you know, we try to keep current. So throughout the transaction, a couple of weeks in, maybe we've updated a sales price or loan amount. We'll update the prelim and we'll do what we call a date down to see if any new liens or judgments have popped up. And then as we are getting ready to actually record the transaction, our recorder will check one more time and make sure nothing has popped up at the last minute before we transfer ownership.
Wow, this is going to be a great show, folks. We're talking to Brandy Jennings and Diane Davis of First American Title. We're talking about liens, judgments, searches. Don't go away, because we're also going to come back and we're going to talk about easements and construction liens, because there's a whole ball of wax that goes on with that. Brandy Jennings and Diane Davis will be right back from First American Title. A quick word from our sponsors, so please don't go away. We're brought to you by John L. Scott. Well, hey, Southern Oregon, welcome back to the Real Estate Show. I'm so excited you have two of my favorite people from First American Title on today. We've got Brandy Jennings and Diane Davis, and we're talking about liens and lien searches, and judgments and closing and all those things you hear about when you're buying and selling houses. But you don't really know until you've had the experience, right, ladies? So one of the things that gets asked during a closing is, have you had any work done on your house? So let's talk about that, because I don't think people understand the vulnerability that homeowners are in. And if you're not the homeowner and you're the buyer, you could still be affected if something isn't taken care of quite right.
Correct. And then that would be a construction lien. You put yourself in risk for getting a construction lien filed if you haven't paid your builder or even if their subs haven't been paid. They all have 75 days from the date they complete their work to file a lien. And those liens, like a lot of the work's completed right before closing, especially if it's like a project to sell the home.
Like a new roof or something?
New roof or something like that. And roofers are very notorious. They are very good at filing their liens when they don't get paid. Those liens take priority even over a new loan. So
really,
yeah, we close on Wednesday, middle of the week, and then by Friday they realize they haven't got paid, and that buyer even has a new loan in place. That lien will take priority over that deed of trust for that lender.
wow.
Have we asked those questions? And even on a new construction build, you work with builders. We have very good builders in this valley, very solid. So that's always a plus, but you want to make sure, if it's somebody you're not too familiar with, that all those subs and even roofing companies, suppliers can file liens. All of those need to make sure they're paid. So that's a question for buyers to ask when they know, maybe has a roof been paid? Can we verify that? And it's not the time to actually announce that at closing, because sometimes that delays the closing.
But what do you mean by that? Can you
so we have the form we ask if anything's done within the last 75 days. And so if, you know, it was a lot of work done and you're gonna say, yes, we did this and this and this, that's something that should be brought maybe prior to closing. So people aren't scammering around trying to make sure we have receipts to show that they're paid, or that we have to contact the supplier or the builder. Especially if you're planning to close same day or next day or something like that.
So it's not just a contractor. Did you just say a supplier
Yeah,
as well?
yes.
So
Yeah.
that would be like a,
Yeah, the roofing material places, because they're the big ticket items, you know, that's a high cost, and they do file liens. Once they file a lien, it attaches to the property for 120 days, so it's not forever. But if they don't get paid, they can go to court and then obtain a judgment on that lien, which will attach to the property.
so even if the lien is paid off, is it still showing for 120 days?
If they file their construction lien, they have to file a release.
Oh, okay. So it's separate steps.
Yeah.
Interesting. So the lumberyard could file a lien as well as the roofer or whoever.
Right. And most buyers and sellers don't realize that when they're doing a lot of remodel work to their home. So that's another good reason why buyers and sellers should have a realtor, because a realtor is going to know everything about that house and what's been done to it. And so if they know there's been some big work that's been done on the property, they're going to let us know ahead of time so that we can make sure everything's been paid and get proof that, you know, the lumber's been paid for and the roofer's been paid for before we get to closing. And we ask that question: have there been big improvements done to the property in the last 75 days? You know, yes, but it's all been taken care of. You already have all the invoices or something like that. But yeah, so that happens quite a bit. You know, if someone is getting ready to sell and they have done a lot of work to the house. Normally, if it's a new construction property, we know that it's new construction, right? And if that buyer is getting a loan, the lender also knows that it's new construction. So that's when it's possible that the lender will require the buyer to purchase early issue title insurance. And that is an additional cost that they pay. It's basically an early title insurance, ensuring that no matter what, that new lender is going to be in first position on the property, in case one of those contractors doesn't get paid and files a lien. That's where the title insurance is going to step in and make sure that lien has been taken care of and paid for, so that the lender remains in first position.
So that's the difference between regular title insurance and what they call early issue, is that the lender is in first place on the new construction. Is that right?
That's right, because we have an exception, all the title companies, it's part of the ALPA policy, and it kind of excludes you from coverage for those type of statutory liens. And so the lenders, when they get their extended coverage policy, the only way they can get that removed prior to completion is paying that fee. And then you can only pay that fee if you're working with one of our, you know, strong builders that's been approved, that we know we can rely on. So, and we've seen it happen, you know, somebody gets in trouble, even though we've closed a lot of transactions with them as a builder, or they get in trouble. We take on that risk period, for the 75 days from completion. That's what the title company's doing. And that's what we're basing that extra fee on, because we take on that risk. So we would have to defend the lender in that case.
So what does that look like if,
and even the buyer maybe, because that coverage automatically applies to the buyer if they're paying for it for their lender's policy, the buyer gets that same coverage.
Oh, gotcha. So that is a scenario where you have a new construction, somebody did not get paid and they filed.
Right.
And then it shows up after closing. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. So what happens then? Let's say that that's the scenario and one of the lumber yards didn't get paid. What do you guys do as the title company?
Well, we reach back out to the seller. But you know, we take on all that responsibility. If worst case scenario, we can't get a hold of the seller and they don't want to work with us, that's when the title company pays for that lien.
But then there's probably going to be another court case or something with the
I was
seller.
just gonna ask, yeah, do
The
you?
bill, they are responsible.
We
for
don't
paying.
let go too easily,
Yeah.
yeah. We usually recover things like that pretty well, pretty good at it, but it, you know, it's not anything the buyer had to deal with, it's not anything the lender had to deal with. It's what we take on for them.
So this really is an insurance policy.
Yeah, yeah.
Interesting, interesting. And we do have a great group of builders in our valley. We're very lucky.
Very blessed. Yeah.
So I bet that doesn't happen too often, but it's interesting to just kind of hear what the dynamics would be if that did occur. So let's talk about what is a judgment? What does that mean if you're in escrow and you guys call somebody and say there's a judgment that just showed up? What are we talking about there?
That's a judgment. It's filed in the circuit courts of Oregon. And it could be for different things. It could be, like we've already mentioned, the spousal support or the child support, which usually doesn't surprise people. They know they have that. But sometimes it's that credit card bill that they've been behind on and they finally took it to court and got a judgment filed against them. So basically that judgment now attaches to their property, and it could hit last minute. Or, you know, it could just be like you took out a small loan to buy, you know, your travel trailer or something that you ended up not paying because you're trying to sell it. And these people went to court to obtain a judgment against you, and it will attach to your property. So,
And if you own more than one property, it will attach to all of your properties, because again.
Will it really?
Yes, because it follows the person. So if that person owns multiple properties, those judgments that are filed against that person attach to all the properties that they own.
For that same judgment?
yes, they don't, it's just automatic.
Wow.
You don't have to say, they don't have to, you know, list the properties or anything like that. It's automatic to anything that you own.
Interesting. We're talking to Brandy Jennings and Diane Davis of First American Title, two of my favorite smart people in the world. And we're talking about lien searches, judgments, construction issues during closing, and also when you're buying and selling. So when we're going back to the judgments, has there ever been a time when somebody's been surprised to get that phone call? Yeah. What was it that they didn't know? We only have a few seconds, but just curious.
Basically, like that scenario I was just saying, where, you know, somebody bought a motorcycle or something like that is what I remember, and they knew they weren't paying it, and they just didn't think the judgment would attach to the property. They knew that was an issue, but they didn't think, you know, it would happen and that they needed to disclose it right before closing. Interesting.
Well, we got to take a quick break. Stay tuned. We've got more Brandy Jennings and Diane Davis, First American Title. Well, welcome back to the Real Estate Show, everybody. I'm Alice Lema. I'm a broker at John L. Scott Real Estate in beautiful Southern Oregon. And I'm getting to talk to Brandy Jennings and Diane Davis of First American Title today. Before we get back to Brandy and Diane, just a quick reminder that this episode will air tomorrow, again, as a repeat at 8 a.m. Sunday morning on our new radio home, the ACE AM 1300. So you can get more of Brandy and Diane. And remind yourself all there is to know about lien searches, title, and judgment. So welcome back, ladies.
Yeah.
So one of the things we wanted to touch on that came up during the break was just what is title insurance?
Sure. I mean, in Oregon, we have everything in one place. We have title and escrow. So the title insurance portion, we're covering those. We're going to do the property search, everything that's a public record. The way I explain title insurance to people is when they think insurance, they're thinking, I'm going to pay a monthly premium every month for the rest of my life to cover things that might happen.
Oh, gotcha.
Or title insurance is a one-time premium that you pay that's going to cover anything that may have happened in the past. So that when you buy a piece of property and you have title insurance and you've moved in and it's been a few months and you receive something in the mail or somebody shows up on your doorstep that says, this home is supposed to be mine. My, ex-mother-in-law left it to me in her will. That's where the title insurance is going to step in and say, no, we've insured this new buyer is the owner of this property. we're gonna make that go away. So ensuring something that may have happened in the past is what title insurance does. And then as for the escrow portion of it, here in Oregon, we're the neutral third party. So we're handling all the paperwork. We're going to take in all the money. We do everything by instruction. And then we're going to make sure that everything gets recorded and conveyed over to the new lender and everybody's paid. But because we're the neutral third party, we're doing everything by instruction. So we're working for the buyer and the seller to make sure everything is done properly. That makes sense?
Kind of like Switzerland.
Yeah.
Yes.
Somebody said that at a signing this week. It's like, oh, you're like Switzerland. Nobody, no sides, everybody's neutral. And I didn't realize that in some states, title and escrow are not together.
Yeah, some states will use an attorney for their neutral third party to handle the paperwork and the money and that type of thing. And I believe they do the recording of the documents as well. And then you just have the title insurance underwriter that is providing the title insurance.
So it's state by state.
Yeah. And even like Washington, I'm not sure about California, but Washington has a lot of just escrow only companies that aren't affiliated with title. They just branch out and open title requests, whoever they choose to, open title with. If, the sales, the real estate agents use this brand X escrow company. They might use First American on this one. They might use Fidelity on a different one. It just, they're not connected to anybody.
So they have two different companies, one doing title and one doing escrow. Well, I feel like we're really lucky in Oregon to have them together, but they are completely different activities.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
But they affect each other.
Mhm.
So one of the things we were talking about before the break were judgments and what is a judgment. And sometimes people can be surprised. Are there any, so is a judgment more of a court procedure that ends up kind of following you around with a monetary?
Yeah, people shouldn't be surprised because they're usually getting notice beforehand or services, but maybe for some reason they didn't receive those notices or services of the court proceeding in place. Other things are IRS liens, but you usually kind of know ahead of time if you're behind on that as well. But those get we found those at last minute a recording that pop up. State can file a state tax lien on the same, so
And those normally just get recorded. They don't have to go through the court
Yeah.
system and get a judgment. So that's where you're finding a different name of judgment.
I see.
Mhm.
Interesting.
Like the contractor that didn't get paid, he can just go record a lien against that property saying I didn't get paid. He doesn't have to go through the whole court process of getting a judgment.
So, I've actually been at closings where just a regular person filed a lien and it wasn't substantiated later, but they stopped the closing. Can we talk about the mechanics of that dynamic?
That's probably pretty rare, but I've heard, and I haven't really experienced it, but I've heard, it does take us a minute to sort through it. We have to have our time to, recognize what it is. And it's not necessary on us to do the legality part of that. We have to go to either our underwriters or we have to reach out. If they have an attorney they think that they're using, most time in that scenario, they don't. It's kind of like a wild lien, kind of the way we look at it. But it takes a little bit of due diligence to do the research on it. So it could hold it up, which is very unfair. But if it turns out being not a valid lien to begin with, but it's gonna slow it up. We can't make that decision right away, but pretty fast at it. So
Yeah, well, it's important to have it sorted out so that everybody knows what the legalities are. I'm wondering, does that ever happen in family when there's a death in the family and there's an asset, a home or a multifamily unit or something? And can somebody who's not maybe officially entitled file a lien and just force it to be dealt with?
well, I haven't really ever heard of them filing a lien, but usually unless unless it was automatic survivorship and you're going through a probate or a small estate, that's their chance to address that. So we take those very seriously. We go through those court proceedings with a fine tooth comb and make sure, we know who all the heirs are and everything prior to closing.
Gotcha.
So that's because that is one of the biggest risk factors for title insurance companies are any possible outside heirs. So
Yeah.
we do a good job trying to do all that research prior, so it doesn't usually sneak up on us at closing.
Right, finding out who all the heirs are and then proof that each heir has been reached out to regarding this property.
Well, and at least in our area, the real estate agents, they're usually the first person to bring that to everybody's attention and to also talk to the family about that possibility. So we really, like you said, we don't really have that happen, but if we're talking about random people filing random things at the last minute, that just occurred to me as we were chatting about that. What about divorce in Oregon? How is real estate and divorce and those judgments dealt with during a real estate sale?
Well, and when they file a divorce, all the divorces in Oregon have an automatic restraining order built in to not sell or convey or even spend any of the money, what would be divorce assets, marital assets. So even on, of course it affects sellers, but even on a buyer side, that's one thing we do look at. We don't look for the judgments and stuff, but if they have a pending divorce, are they using marital asset money to buy this new house? So we have to make sure this pending divorce that who's ever not the spouse not buying the home is okay, and we obtain a deed and a zero demand, and that they know that the funds aren't their funds being used to buy that house.
Yeah.
It's a touchy subject. People get not happy with that usually, but we didn't make that statute, so.
Right. And this kind of brings up a good topic too, because every state is different, and so Oregon is not what they call a community property state.
A lot of people don't know that.
Right, but California is, and a lot of people move up here from California, so they think the vesting to their title is going to be exactly the same in Oregon as it was in California, where in California, if you are a spouse and you purchase a piece of property, your husband or wife also owns that property with you. Whereas in Oregon, me as a wife can purchase a property on my own and it's just in my name. But however, it can still kind of work similarly because it does become a marital asset. So it can be my property, but if there's a divorce that's been filed, they have to look at it. Is this a marital asset? What makes it just hers?
Yes.
But yes, so in Oregon, you can own property without your spouse. In California, you really can't. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So in Oregon, because we're not a community property state, we only have a few minutes for the next commercial break. Can you buy and sell property without telling your spouse?
You can, yes. If you're not having a pending divorce, if Brandy owned that house for herself, she doesn't have to get any sort of anything. Like California would get a deed, and I think even Washington would. I think both states would. So we're surrounded by that, but unless there's that divorce putting the stop to anything that Brandy might be doing, then they're allowed to do that without anything.
Yep. Super interesting. We're talking to Brandy Jennings and Diane Davis, First American Title. We've got to take a quick commercial break. Say thank you to John L. Scott, Ashland and Medford, Guy Giles Mutual Mortgage, and our local Rogue Valley Association of Realtors. Don't touch that dial. We've got more great info coming. We really appreciate your sponsorship from these good folks. They bring us to you every week. We'll be right back. Give me a call if you'd like to be a sponsor or a guest, 541-301-7980. Welcome back, everybody, to the Real Estate Show. We've got Diane Davis and Brandy Jennings of First American Title. We're learning lots and lots of great information about title insurance, lien searches, divorces, probates, construction loans, judgments. And Brandy, one of the things you mentioned before was something about how First American was a purchase oriented. What was that phrase?
Yeah, we use the purchase money theory. So
Purchase money theory.
other title companies may do a judgment and lien search against the buyer when they're purchasing property. We actually don't do that. So we don't have to worry about getting child support satisfactions or spousal satisfactions for the buyer because they technically, it doesn't really matter. They're not owners of the property yet, so we don't need to go through all of that. Once they do own the property, then those judgments would attach to the property. But as to purchase it, their new lender is going to be in first position, and whatever they had attached to them before owning the property doesn't really come into play. So that's why First American goes with that purchase money theory, whereas other title companies will make you still maybe go through those hoops of getting the satisfactions from the ex-spouse or whatnot.
So one of the things we haven't talked about was student loans. Do those show up?
Student loans will show up on a credit report, but not necessarily
Gotcha.
attached to the person and file a judgment or lien.
If you don't pay your student loan, I wonder if that's one of the ones that could attach.
I've never seen a student loan attached to a
They're
property.
treated differently, so I just didn't know.
I don't think, see those filed in the courts.
Yeah, it was just a passing thought.
Yeah, that's a good question.
What about student loans?
So on the pairs, the only thing that really matters is that pending divorce, if they just filed for divorce, we'll have to clear that. And then also a bankruptcy. So, but that's kind of obvious. If they're in bankruptcy, you can't really go buy anything.
Gotcha, but you could sell something.
Yes, yes. So,
Most of the time, if they are going to sell something, though, we need to be notified that there is a bankruptcy, and we're most likely going to have to deal with the bankruptcy trustee to make sure that they do have the ability to sell whatever it is that they're wanting to sell.
So all those court proceedings, bankruptcies, probates, custodialship, those kinds of things.
Yeah, the quicker they can tell their escrow officer at the beginning of the transaction, the better, so that we can close on time and not have to delay closing on the transaction.
And to any real estate agents listening, you can do that when you take the listing.
That's right. And
Yeah.
I'm always happy to answer questions at the time of, getting the listing versus once you're in contract. So we can try to take care of some things before it goes into contract. Of course, if we're going to do all that, we hope that you bring the transaction to First American Title.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, we're happy to help at the listing. Whenever people have questions, to just give us a call. We'll see what we can do beforehand.
and we get that a lot from, when like the parties are held in a trust, but one of them passed away, they'll ask us, if we could review the trust, if only one person signs, or if both trustees have died and it's the kids taking over the trust, we'll review that, and it helps you guys know who should be signing your listing agreement and who will be, who signed your contract and all that. So we're happy to do that in advance.
And you guys do a great job, and it doesn't take too terribly long. And then you get it set up properly because how those names are written from the beginning matters
Yeah.
more than you'll ever know.
Yeah, power of attorney is the same, because some people want to supply a power of attorney, but the property's held in a trust, so not necessarily need the power of attorney, you're gonna rely on the trust, so stuff
Well,
like
and
that.
some of the power of attorneys aren't valid anymore. We've had situations, or they're the wrong power of attorney. A lot of us didn't even know there are different kinds of powers of attorney.
Yeah. And we're very lucky here at First American in Southern Oregon because we have our title officers here on site. Our entire title plant is here on site. And the majority of our title officers have been doing this for, many, many years. So lots of knowledge and great people to just advocate for you and answer all your questions.
And one of the advantages to that longevity in a small town is that you have a better chance of somebody remembering what happened 30 years ago when blah, blah, blah. Like we have a lot of easements. That's something we haven't talked about, Diane, but easements do get vetted and discussed during this search time.
Yeah, and that is one thing, sometimes our longevity, you know the area, so you're like, oh, we better check out the easements on this property because we know it's, a lot of privately owned land in between here and there. But that's something, when you're listing the property, you want to start talking about early too. If you don't abut a public county road and you're going over some private lands, or even if you maybe just think it's, a BLM road, BLM land, cutting through to get to your property, that's something to ask your seller right now that, what's in place for this access. Or your well or your septic, if it's, it's not on your property, on your neighbors, let's talk about that. prior.
It does happen.
Yeah,
Right.
and those, access, we can kind of see, you don't abut a public road on the map, we're gonna check for that. We don't know about the well or the septic or anything, so it's something, the minute you know that as a listing agent, you wanna make sure there's an easement in place for that, so.
Yeah. It's because sometimes that easement will actually be recorded against the property next door. So maybe we can on
Oh,
your property that is being sold and it didn't show that well or septic easement and everybody's wondering where it's at. If you bring your title officer into the loop and just say, hey, there should be an easement for this, then we're gonna search the property surrounding, looking for that easement. We're not automatically gonna search all the properties around your property. So sometimes you'll see a note at the bottom of your preliminary title report that mentions, oh, there is a septic easement. It's actually attached to, the property next door and what the recording number is. It does benefit this property.
so I see there's a note pointing you to the other property
Yeah.
somewhere. So you wouldn't have the same easement recorded on two properties? Is that what you're saying?
Oh, no, you might, if they did it right, it should be.
Yeah.
Ah.
If they did the servient piece, saying there's an easement running over this, and it's to benefit this piece, and they put legal description on both, then it's gonna show to both.
So it should be on both.
Yes, it should be on both, but they tend not to do that, so. They forget, they'll say, or, it's benefit the neighbor's property, or, whatever property they own, but they don't list whatever property that benefiting property is. So you find it on the servient piece that it runs over, but you don't find the benefiting property often.
So if you need to do a new easement in the middle of a transaction, who writes that up?
Usually an attorney.
Okay,
We do have if you take you back a few years, Stevens Nest form, an easement form that we're allowed to use. We're not usually, it's usually used when there's been an easement in place for an existing driveway or the existing well. That we can kind of tie to that, we can help with that. But it's mostly you want to get an attorney involved, especially if there's going to be any maintenance terms and extra things that they want included in that.
so you would just call up a local real estate attorney and say, this is the situation. Is that something you guys instigate, or do the clients do that? The clients do that.
But we're happy to work with the attorney. Often that call gets made and then they reach back out to the title department and say, what do we exactly need? And we work with them on that.
So it is possible to have those things corrected, created, changed during the escrow process.
Yes.
But depending on all parties that need to sign it, it could delay your closing. So
But that would be worth it to have it done properly.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So Brandy, let's talk more about just First American in general. My understanding is you're quite a large company.
we are, we are actually international, obviously throughout the nation in the United States. I would say, working for First American, I think the number one in everything, but we are the most financially strong title company. We're the only title company that has its own bank. So
Really?
very proud of that. Yes. And it's one of those things right now with all the cyber fraud that's happening, that's what the fraudsters are trying to get from you. It's, trying to get those wire instructions and maybe change the bank and accounting number so that they can take someone's money. So our wire instructions do not change. Our bank is First American Trust. So if you got wire instructions from First American and they're not going to First American Trust, that's definitely, a red flag that you should be reaching out to your escrow officer. And of course, always just reaching out with the contact information that you have and not necessarily the contact information that was sent to you in an email. So we always ask that people verify those wire instructions. Those cyber criminals have gotten very good. You used to really be able to tell if it was somebody that was trying to take your money or trying to pretend like they were someone else, but they've gotten very, very good. So our company is really great on making sure all of our employees are educated. We go through all kinds of training, constant training throughout the year to make sure that we're not going to fall for any kind of cyber criminal act.
Well, and you have a secure portal now that's really tight.
It's amazing. And it's a great way to communicate with your escrow officer through First American Securities. So First American actually spends more on technology and security than all the other title companies combined.
Wow.
The innovator when it comes to technology for real
All
estate
kinds,
transactions, and we're very, very proud of that.
Well, you know, we're going to have you guys back on. We have about 10 more questions we just didn't have time to get to, but thank you, Brandy Jennings and Diane Davis, First American. Thank you so much, ladies.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
So we're going to have to wrap up for the weekend, folks. We'll be back again next week. Give me a call if you'd like to be a sponsor or a guest, 541-301-7980. Otherwise, have a beautiful Southern Oregon weekend, and we'll see you next time. Bye, folks. Guy Giles and also Arvar.